Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And in this particular episode, I'm going to be talking about improving the outcome. Now, this goes out to those who have had a relationship breakdown. Let's say it split. You guys split the sheets. You're going totally different directions. And whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. The feeling of the fact that it didn't work out, there's a lot of things that are going to be rolling around in your mind. You're probably going to try to figure out how you can fix it. And those fix-it folks, which I tend to fall into that camp, you want to know what didn't work. And sometimes that might be because you want to try to go back into the relationship and undo the damage. Well, that's an approach. Others, when you know the relationship is Splitsville, it's not going to be something you're going to revisit, but you're still going to want to know what happened, what went wrong. Sometimes you can get that information from the ex, or if you've kind of replayed the events in your mind, you may remember conversations about things that weren't going on. If you have a diary, you may have written things down. When I'm talking about improving the outcome, what I want you to do is I want you to have answers to these questions so that when you go forward in life, if you have personal issues you need to work on because they came up, well then it's time to take it on. And there's clues everywhere. How people interact around you, and it's not just always your significant other. You have friends and acquaintances there, and those could be people at work. They could be a great source for giving you some input on how you're being, because there's a lot that we don't see about ourselves that loving people we trust, people who are, and I mean well-intentioned, and I don't mean, and that's who I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of people who are well-intentioned, can give you information to help you improve the outcome of your future. So one of the important things is remembering that when a relationship breaks up, there are clues. As I've just illustrated, you could ask your significant other or the person who is now your ex for information. You can go back and replay the events, and you may have had some toxic behavior that has followed you all along. And obviously, if that's the case, then you know you need to work on that. Don't be in denial about it, because that's something that follows you. If you have a habit of burying your head in the sand, understand that this is something that's going to keep repeating itself, and you need to get a handle on why that happens for you. You can't look to other people to solve these kinds of problems. This is something that you have to grasp. And it's part of the journey of being a human being. You're going to do it. You're going to pay the price. And it's going to be quite a relief. And it might be quite a job to fix something like that. But you know, the interesting thing is when you take something like that on, it's amazing how many other things in life that one problem probably affected that will also get fixed. For example, if you are the kind of person that buries your head in the sand and you're in denial about a lot of things, then there are probably a lot of things about your life that are in a shambles that people who have operated around you have had to compensate for, and you know, maybe they're tired of it. And if it's this thing about the relationship that you're in that fell apart because of it, well, obviously it's a clue. They got tired of handling your baggage and you not doing so. Because there's only so much making up. There's only so many I'm sorries that you could do for somebody else until they finally get tired of it. And when they do, because for some people it's quite a hurdle for them to finally let go of a relationship. I think we all have our limits. And, some individuals are very diehard. They stay in it. And some people have the mindset, they're in a relationship. It's easier to stay in the bad relationship rather than start over and be in another. And if you're in one of those kinds, let's say you're with a person that believes that, they're probably giving you a lot of leeway. You've probably been screwing up a lot for a long time, and they just haven't made the decision to leave because they don't have it in them to do so. But that doesn't mean that you should continue to be a lousy person in that relationship. You need to take on the stuff, fix it for both of you, and then love that person for having stuck with you through all your garbage. That's an important point to make. Realize that you put a burden on other people by not handling your baggage. And when you learn to do that, it's time that it's the opportunity for you to do it. But then remember, take it on and love people around you. Don't then turn around and then become a tyrant because you've taken on your stuff. Now you're going to start poking at other people because we all kind of do things in our own time. But I liken that the dynamic of you being present enough to handle your stuff, it sort of affects the outcome of other people. When it lessens the burden, then people tend to feel they appreciate it, and you may get a response that you probably weren't necessarily looking for. But it's nice to receive that extra love because now they're not burdened with handling for overcompensating. And I'll give you a little illustration. And I hear this all the time when people have responsibilities in a household, and there's a chore list. I'll use a simple one. If it's your day to do the dishes, do the dishes. Don't keep leaving it for your partner, and don't keep making messes for them to clean up. And it's one of those interesting things when you are in a relationship and how you could be so unobservant as to the impact that you have on somebody else's life. You can look to them and they can give you clues. Some people, they don't notice it until they're getting the cold shoulder, until they're getting the looks that someone, or the feeling that someone is angry, and then they want to do damage control. I say you can really go a long way to improving the outcome of these kinds of circumstances if you don't wait till it's reached some sort of extreme. And you can always be in communication with your partner about what they think. See, that's a valuable tool. And I liken it to before, I call it pre-damage control, because before you do something that's going to make someone so upset that they're going to have to react, it's better that you get ahead of the problem. And once you do that, then you become a problem solver, or you're a person that likes to have solutions to things rather than waiting for things to blow up. And I'm not saying you need to take your whole relationship and turn it upside down, but there are generally a couple of things that can go a long way to showing your partner that you're trying to be attentive, that you're trying to make the relationship a priority. And that's ultimately what you're signaling here. By taking on some of your stuff, you're making a relationship priority. And it's good to say that. So if someone sees you going through some changes, then they recognize what the change is about. Because here's the thing, as a casual observer, if I'm in a relationship with someone and I see things happening, but I don't necessarily know why, I may not know the whole history around this, what the changes are about, but I might think that I've caused something, and I want to know that if I'm causing something, whether it's good or bad. So it's important to sort of say, hey, look, I'm taking this thing on, and this is what I'm facing. And believe it, you can get so much more support when you declare that, look, this is what I'm taking on, because one can see, your significant other can see that, wow, you're really looking to make a difference, and you're trying to improve yourself and be a better person. People love that. See, that goes along those lines of being empowered to do something positive. Because here's the opposite of that, and it's the needy person. That needy person, what do? They generally tend to suck the life out of you. And what happens when needy people come around? You generally want to turn away from them and run, because it's like they're asking for more of you than you have the capacity to give. You see, if you've been one of those kinds of individuals, then people are going to want to avoid you. But if you're willing to make changes, if you're willing to take on things and be magnanimous in that, where taking on a problem is a good thing. And being willing to do that and sharing that with your significant other says to them that, hey, I value this, I value us, and I value communication. And then it's good to expect the same from them. It's actually, it's a good thing that feeds on itself. It improves the outcome. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and I'll be right back, and we're going to talk about this some more. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And picking up where I left off, I was talking about how to improve the outcome. And one of the things that I want you to think about is this is not something you necessarily want to do in secret. You certainly want support. It's nice to be able to give a gift to someone, but this isn't a Christmas gift here. This isn't a birthday present. When you're working on yourself, there's always that. There's a little slippage. I want to term it. You're working, and yes, you're working on that problem, and you're wanting to have success, but it's not always this steady climb. You're going to kind of go up that hill a little bit, and you fall back. Well, that little bit of slippage. Remember that if you're just sort of doing this thing in secret. That is, you're in a relationship with somebody and you're trying to work on these improvements in secret, it's going to have an impact on other people because they're going to see something is happening. They're not necessarily going to know what it is. And you may have even gotten questions. Okay, what are you doing? Are you working on something? It's good to reveal that. It's good to share that you're trying to make some personal improvements. I think it's inspiring. It certainly would be a welcome news to someone who's been involved with you. And I'm sure that they would want to be in your corner. They want to be supportive. And it's nice when something like that happens because it's like I said, it inspires other people, your significant others in life, to maybe they want to take on something. And it's nice how that happens. You start supporting each other and good things tend to happen. People get happy around that. I mean, that's how you can create happiness. I mean, think about that. It's not always about some external thing, and it's not about looking at the stock market or looking at something on TV and being entertained. It's really about creating something in your life, and you have the power to do that every single day. So if you think about it on those terms, remember, your goal here is to improve the outcome, and you do that by, in this instance, communicating with your significant other that you've got something that you're working on, and that way you're able to get their support because whatever you do impacts them. Know that when you're in a relationship, you're not just operating in a vacuum. Whatever you do impacts them, and I'm sure that they're going to want to be part of it. Remember to also celebrate your successes as this thing moves along incrementally, and whatever it is you're taking on. It could be that you're going to take night classes, or you're going to get on an exercise program, or you're going to read a book about self-help, or you're going to read the Bible, or whatever you choose to do. It's nice to be supported in that endeavor. And I can tell you that I have found the same thing in my life. I tend to love to read at times, and finding moments to do that in a busy life it can be a little daunting. So my thing is I would choose to read at night. Well, if you got a significant other that likes to go to sleep and you're sitting there reading in bed, you don't necessarily turn the light, that might have some tension to it. So I have to do it in another room. But at least they understand that that's what you're doing and you're not avoiding going to bed or something like that. Because, that could have consequences. And you don't want that one. You definitely don't want that one. So share what's going on, being clear, celebrate your victories. And, here's another little thing to think about. It's okay to ask for support. Again, when you declare what you're doing, asking for support could be something, and I liken it to this. You don't necessarily want to burden other people, but maybe asking for support means giving you the space to do what you need to do. And when you're dealing with personal stuff and you have a relationship, sometimes this could be a real challenge because when you're dealing with your own stuff, sometimes we only deal with it when we're in crisis. Something comes up, it forces us to face it. And then what do we say to ourselves? Oh, well, oops, I better deal with that before something bad happens. Well, that's kind of like doing it too late. And what I like to encourage people to do is to deal with that stuff before it becomes crisis. Because when you're doing damage control, then you got a lot more work to do. Because some of these things, you already know that it's out there for you to face. So ask for support. And I believe people would be very, very happy to give you the space to do what you need to do. And I think some of this also comes from knowing your own baggage. If you've been in a relationship or relationships and, you reach a certain age, you probably already know the problem. And you've got some inkling. So here's an illustration. I'm sure we can imagine somebody who complains that their boyfriend or their girlfriend always has issues. Well, I'm going to be the first person to tell you that if you're always complaining about the other person having issues, remember, you're picking them to be involved with. And you got to maybe look in the mirror. Not be a vampire. Look in the mirror. I know vampires can't see themselves in a mirror. So I'm telling you to look in the mirror and see the problem. You're the common denominator. Because interesting enough that there are people that seem to have drama in their life all the time. And if you have drama in your life all the time, look in the mirror because it's you. It's not them. It's you. You keep picking those individuals and you keep getting yourself into situations that are causing the drama. Now, when these people are out of your life, do you still have drama? If you do, remember, it's you. If you don't, well then, wow, you've got a good life. And then you got to start looking at, okay, who are you picking to be in your life? Because some people are drama kings or queens. And we can definitely deal with a lot less of that. So one more thing I want to mention too on this subject is dealing with your fear. I think here's the idea. Why would a person not want to take on those issues? And I say it's fear because I think it's fear of failure. Sometimes we set the bar way too high for ourselves, and you have to do this thing incrementally. So if you have toxic behavior, you can't necessarily expect to be able to fix that all on your own. You're going to have to get some knowledge. Start with a book, say a counselor, an advocate, somebody who can help you through this. But whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, whatever your vehicle is, whether it's Bible study, something, you need to get some input on how to deal with your problem and you need to get some support. But I think the reason sometimes we don't take on those things is because of our fear of failure. I think you have to run that risk in order to get something out of it. So you have to really invest yourself in wanting to do better. Easier said than done, obviously, because fear stops us from doing a lot of things. There's an interesting, and I can attest to this myself. 90% of what we fear never really happens. Really. 90% of what we fear never really happens. We have the capacity in our minds to talk ourselves out of doing the right thing all the time. We will wait and let somebody else tell us to do it. Yeah, the right thing, but we won't do it ourselves. And isn't that an amazing thought? We already know what it is to do, but we don't do it ourselves. And therefore, we delay the outcome. And all of that is about fear. But we'll look outwards and we'll criticize other people. We'll make judgments about other people. But then and therefore, when it comes to making decisions about our own lives and moving forward with things, you know what? You got to really look at yourself and understand that it's fear is what's keeping you from doing it. And it stops a lot of people from doing things. Fear is what prevented a lot of people from sailing in the ocean because they thought they'd fall over the edge. They said the world was flat. Boy, did we find out that was not true. Okay? Remember, your world is not flat. It's round. You're not going to fall off. You're going to have to deal with things. But, hey, that's good. That's what you're supposed to do. You deal with them, you learn how to deal with them, and you move on to the next. I'm going to take another break here, and I'll be back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Hello and welcome back. You're listening to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I'm your host, John Johnson. And what I've been talking about is improving the outcome. And it's about taking on situations, problems on your own. And we've talked about damage control, and that's basically something you do after the problem has sort of been exposed and there's no containment. But I'm suggesting that a lot of us know what the issues are in our life anyway, and we tend to ignore them until it reaches a crisis point. That could be either a breakup with someone or an argument, something like that that causes it to have what I call loses containment. Because I think we're very adept at giving explanations and i.e. excuses to not do stuff, and it sort of band-aids the situation. And if someone is feeling upset about something that happened and you're not dealing with it, well, that means it's going to come back again. And usually most people fear that. So if you're not a person that is good at problem solving, then you probably have seen this over and over again. Or if you're a person that's a drama person, and I mentioned them just before the break. So fear oftentimes prevents us from stepping out there, taking a risk on ourselves. And I think that's something you got to look at it. I say taking a risk. Really, it's an investment. Learn to invest in yourself and take it on that way. I think that's a real positive way of seeing it, and knowing that there's going to be a good outcome. It's easy to want to shoot for the moon, and I think sometimes people set the bar way too high in terms of their expectations as far as what they can accomplish. But if they take it in small bites, then they can make improvements. And for that, and the impact that that's going to have on the people around you, that's welcome. They certainly appreciate that you're willing to improve on yourself, and it inspires other people to take on things. And as I mentioned in the last segment, 90% of what we fear never happens. It's all in our heads. And it's amazing how we can talk ourselves into and out of crazy things. We can talk ourselves into believing crazy things and in fact, it's not even a possibility. And for that, it's also, we can put fears in our own minds about things that are never really there to worry about. And I think taking on important challenges like our own faults, that's one of the things, because I think we're always looking at what we're having to give up rather than what we stand to gain. And a lot of times what we stand to gain, we don't even know because you haven't yet made the choice to improve. It's easy to sit and imagine that when you change something that you think about all the losses. You sort of look at it as though you're spending money out of your bank account and the bank account is dwindling, but you're not necessarily looking at it in totality and looking at, okay, you're borrowing. I want to say it this way. You're borrowing from that bank account because you're not seeing the investment in yourself and the improvement that comes with that. And at the end of that investment, there's an improved standard. There's an improved quality of life. And that's the mindset you have to have in order to make changes, in order to deal with problems. You really have to see that there is a benefit to it. And not just to someone else, but to yourself. And by virtue of making yourself better, emotionally, mentally, physically, whichever one we're working on here, then those around you certainly benefit. Sometimes it's inspiring for people to see that you'll take these things on. And I liken it to also learning how to be a better you. Because when you learn how to deal with how you stop yourself, how your fears, how things that come up in your mind, and if you're a very strong-willed person, then you probably do this a great deal. And you affect others around you. But I want you to be able to take on those kinds of things that make it better for you. And as I started to infer that people around you can give you some good input. I mean, if you're a kind of person that in having conversations with other people, and imagine this scenario, because I dealt with somebody like this very recently. They're very strong-willed, and they're not much of a listener. The problem with that is when you're dealing with a person who's not much of a listener, obviously, and you're that person. Let's say you're that person who's not much of a listener, used to just barking orders all the time. Then you're so into shutting people down that they don't want to deal with you. They just basically want you to go away. And that's not very good. I recently, and I can share this with you just on, and I'm going to deal with it just by describing the scenario. I had a boss who was a good person, but they had it that they wanted to do everything their own way. They felt like they had all the ideas. And what the person forgot is being in that position of authority simply meant that they had the power to make decisions. But in order for those choices that this boss made to be carried out, you had to have other people that were willing to do it. You cannot be a leader unless there are people willing to follow. And this is where, in this scenario, it broke down. The people were willing to do what they understood was their responsibility. But it had less to do with this person being in charge and more to do with the integrity of these individuals wanting to do the best job that they could. This person who was a boss was recently removed from that position because they were so heavy-handed, because they did not learn in dealing with people. You do need to have some people skills. Talk to people with courtesy and respect. That's always in fashion. I always believe being courteous, being respectful, being civil is much better than being a loudmouth, shouting people down, learning how to boss people around in a real abusive fashion. Being civil is always in style. And for that person, for that boss who has been recently removed, do I feel bad for them? Yeah, in a sense I do. And because the person really did have a lot of talent. But again, what they failed to do is to learn how to listen. And if you're one of those individuals who's probably run into this, and you may not know who you are, because a lot of these individuals seem to be pretty self-centered. But I hope you're listening, and I hope something that I'm saying to you resonates, to get you to listen, to understand it. That's something to learn how to do, because I was giving an illustration of how you can improve the outcome and the experience of other people by learning some things about yourself in your heavy-handed nature, and by reeling that in and learning to be a listener and empowering other people to be cause in the matter as well, and give them a pat on the back, because then people respect you, they appreciate you, because other people like to be acknowledged as well. And that goes a long way to developing loyalty from other individuals, because they understand that you appreciate them. And that's great. We're talking about improving the outcome. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Thank you for listening.